Hello, welcome to Matthew Hardy Musical. Today I want to talk about NAMT, the National Alliance of Musical Theater. This is a really incredible organization that has been around for 37 years. And what they do is they really support writers. They do a competition where writers submit their new musicals. They submit a full script and several demos, and this army of adjudicators goes through these musicals and they choose 8 musicals to highlight as part of their annual fall conference. Now, the people that belong to NAMT, it's New York producers, but it's really theaters from all over the nation that want to produce new musicals belong to this organization. They all come to New York and they watch these presentations. So if you're a musical theater writer and you want to get your show produced, this is the festival to be in. And I'll be honest, I've applied for it a couple times, haven't gotten in. This year there was 537 applicants. So it gets winnowed down to 8. So a lot of it is about quality and craft, but a lot of it is just going to be kind of luck of the draw because the adjudication committee, it changes year to year. You have a piece that you want to be seen, it's a little bit of a crapshoot. You send it in and hopefully it will resonate with whoever ends up reading your show in the first round. Have to have a good show, but then also it helps to really get lucky. And you're only allowed to submit a show twice to be considered. Once you submitted it the second time, you can't submit your show anymore. So you got to find another avenue to get it seen, like the New York Musical Theater Festival, which is the route I went with my show Flambe Dreams. I should say RIP the New York Musical Theater Festival because it no longer exists. So now we have the Fringe Festival that we can try. And then there's also workshops like the BMI Musical Theater Workshop, which is a weekly workshop. And then there's an ASCAP workshop, which is only done, I guess, a couple times a year. It's done in LA, it's done in New York. But I'm getting off from NAMT, which I want to talk about. I've been to the NAMT festival in the past, but usually I would go with a friend who was a member of NAMT, who was in town and said, hey, do you want to go see one of these presentations? And I'd go and I'd see one or two. This time, because I've been doing the YouTubes, I reached out and I said I would love to attend the festival. And they said, well, we don't really do reviews because these are unprocessed and they're only 45 minutes excerpts. And I said, that's fine. I'm not going to do a bored and confused review because I understand that's not what we're doing here. So I said, I just want to do a video highlighting the NAMT festival. I went and I did the last 2 days. There's 4 days to this. The first 2 days are like seminars and luncheons and meeting other theaters. I skipped that part, although it would have been great to schmooze next year. But I just did the last 2 days, which is when the 8 shows are presented, as well as some what they call college road trips, where universities that have theater programs that like to produce new musicals, they come in and they have some performances of solo songs from some of the shows they produced. And then at the last day of the festival, there was a NAMT podcast that they recorded live with a live audience, and that was fun to attend as well. Some of the shows that have been presented at NAMT have gone on to at least be developed, gotten a workshop or a production. I think it's 85% have moved forward in some capacity. And some shows have moved even all the way on to Broadway. Drowsy Chaperone was featured at NAMT. So was Come From Away, 2 Canadian shows. And Children of Eden. I'm just trying to think of off the top of my head, Honk, the kids show. So there's been many shows from this have gone on to have bigger lives. And this is why, as a writer, you should want your show to be in NAMT. So let's jump into the 8 shows that I saw last week when I attended the festival. Let's start out with Alice Bliss. Book by Karen Hartman, music by Jenny Gearing, lyrics by Adam Guan. He's a name you may have heard before. And it's based on Laura Harrington's novel. I think this was the only show of the 8 shows that was based on an existing work. This show tells the story of a family. The main character in this is a young teenage girl, and her parents are separated. Her father is in the military, and he's been sent to serve in the Iraq War. This takes place in early 2000s. When was the Iraq War? Anyhow, so it really focuses around, there's a lot of teenage angst in this movie. She's at odds with her mother, Her little sister is very intelligent. She had a lot of humor. I enjoyed this presentation. I thought the score was just very lush and very lovely. The music was very beautiful. This is a very strong female cast. All of the lead roles are female, and I think this is a show that would appeal to audiences who enjoy a family drama. I think young women would really enjoy this show because our central character is a teenager. It's really viewing her trials and tribulations from her point of view. So, yeah, that's Alice Bliss. Next, we have Wakeman. Wakeman also has 3 women as the main characters. Wakeman is very interesting. The book, music, and lyrics are by Jen Grinnells, and this is her first musical. She's a singer-songwriter, and from what I understood from her introduction is that Wakeman is based on a lot of these letters that were written by this woman who pretended to be a man so that she could fight in the Civil War. And this show really focuses around 3 women that were all pretending to be men to fight in the Civil War. So watching this show, I was really blown away by the voices of these 3 women, primarily the woman who plays Wakeman. Her name is Ari Notar... Oh my God. God help us. Ari Notaratomaso. How'd I do? Did I get that right, Ari? She had a really great belt, like rock belt. The singing in this kind of reminded me of like Heart, the band Heart from the 1980s, 90s. Just that kind of rock. This score very much felt like a singer-songwriter kind of score. It had a lot of solos. There were a lot of solos for women, a lot of ballads. It primarily focuses on these 3 women, but then there's a large chorus of men who got some kind of group numbers that they would sing together about working on the rails, or it wasn't rails, but they were doing some kind of job. And then when we get to the military part of the show, they're the soldiers and they're expressing their experience. I mean, blown away by the singing in this. Some beautiful singer-songwriter kind of songs coming out of this. A lot of guitar-heavy accompaniment. Interesting thing about these shows is most everyone seemed to opt for drums, guitar, and piano. But interesting, I'm going to jump back to Alice Bliss. Alice Bliss was the one show that didn't use drums. They used piano, guitar, and bass. Whereas Wakeman, they had PJ Jew, who played electric bass, piano, guitar, and harmonica. But it was primarily piano, guitar, and drums. If you can play lots of instruments, you will be employed. So yeah, Wakeman was an interesting period piece about a story that I was really unfamiliar with, and I thought the singing was just incredible in it. Next, I went to see Roja. Roja was inspired by the Little Red Riding Hood fairy tale. It doesn't really follow the fairy tale, but it has the character of Roja, who is this girl who wears this red kind of poncho that her father used to wear. Her father has passed on, and she meets a magical wolf who says that he can help her bring her father back to life. The question is, can we trust this wolf? This is written, book, music, and lyrics by Jamie Lozano and Tommy Newman. And this show felt kind of like it was bordering between a show for a younger audience and a family show, because our lead character is this young girl in Mexico, and the second character is the wolf, played by a male, and then of course her mother is very important, and there's a evil landowner who's making things difficult for this struggling family now that their father has passed. So the music, I was really taken by this music because it was very guitar, Spanish guitar, Mexican guitar. I really love that in the score. I'm a big guitar fan. So this one used percussion and 2 guitars. So I thought the sound of this music was just great. It really was bringing the folklorico of Mexico to life for me. The music is what captured me with this story. Okay, next we have a show called Particle. Particle follows a lead character of another young girl who, she and her twin brother are in the world of online gaming, playing video games. And I didn't know this, but it's like $1 billion, maybe I did know, Twitch. But it's like $1 billion industry. And there are young people who can make a career just out of playing video games. Crazy, right? So this was written book by Zelda Sahin, Autumn Reeser, and Derek Greger. Music by Derek Greger, lyrics by Zelda Sahin. And this is such an interesting world that I was excited to look into. I thought the score was at its best when Derek McGregor was doing this kind of pop, electropop. I thought it really fit well with this story. You know what? I was really struck with a lot of the stories that I saw now. Usually we think of musicals as being musical comedies, but there were only 2 musical comedies in this 8-show lineup, and I haven't gotten to those yet. But, you know, a lot of these, if we look at this, Alice Bliss is about a teenage girl whose father goes off to Iraq, and spoiler alert, he gets killed at the end of Act 1. Wakeman is about a woman serving in the Civil War, so people dying in that. Roja is about a young girl whose father has died, similar to Alice Bliss. And Particle, these kids have a single mom who I got to give a shout out to, Jennifer Sanchez, who was really funny in this. She's a single mom, and she has these fraternal twins who are getting into gaming. But, spoiler alert, one of the twins dies at the end of Act 1. So there was a lot of death going on in the festival this year. A lot of tragic shows. Now, Particle had humor in it, but wow, they just presented the kind of the first act, the truncated version. Oh, that's something else I wanted to talk about. These 45-minute presentations are really up to whatever the writers want to present. Some of them will try to give a 45-minute that gives you a feeling of the whole show, but most of them tend to try to do a first act truncated with a heavy focus on the songs, which I don't think is a bad way to go. And it also leaves us, a lot of these shows, you're like the 45 minutes end and you're like, what happens next? And that was, most of these I felt like, and this especially, the boy dies, and I didn't see it coming either. I was like, oh. So this show I thought was very interesting because of the electropop score. And I think it's really telling us a story in a world that I don't know a lot about. And I always love experiencing new worlds. So next we have Soft Magical Tofu Boys. You gotta love the name of this show, right? This was an interesting piece with book, music, and lyrics by Kevin Wong. He is Canadian. He mentioned that in his introduction. And it was directed by Telly Lung. He's a Broadway performer. This piece was really interesting. This was Wong's take on writing a piece about his life. He said in his introduction that he'd never really written something that was autobiographical. And, you know, there's a long tradition of like The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams. A lot of playwrights write shows that are really about their lives. It's very common. It's less common with musicals, right? I think like William Finn wrote A New Brain. But I find with musicals, people generally don't do autobiographical stuff. But Kevin Wong said, I want to do an autobiographical. And you know what? My show, Flambe Dreams, is basically an autobiographical piece. So maybe they're more common than I'm giving credit. Maybe they just don't make it to Broadway. Story of My Life was autobiographical. Didn't do well on Broadway, though. Tangent. All right. So Kevin Wong, what I loved about this piece was there's a lot of talk in musical theater in general. There's a talk about pushing the form forward, trying to find new ways. I'm a very traditional person when I write. I'm all about, and when I review shows, I always talk about, you know, we need our I Want song, we need growing action, we need a romance, we need a love story, we need an 11 o'clock number, all of these rules. And musical theater tends to be done very linearly. It usually moves chronologically through the story. So it's really fun. I think it's really fun to see shows like Soft Magical Tofu Boys that find an interesting way to approach musical theater. So in this show, Kevin has basically divided himself into 3 characters: an older self, a younger self, and a very young self. And they each have a magical power. One of them uses imagination to conjure these characters and they come to life for him. Like there's this kind of anime cartoon princess that he can summon and she appears. The middle guy teenage guy, he can make music just appear out of nowhere. And the power of the adult, whose name is Kenneth, not Kevin, in this show, is able to magically create walls. Now, of course, these are all metaphorical for the actual Kevin Wong, who's saying he puts up walls to block people out, and he creates music, which is a superpower of its own, and also the imagination of conjuring characters. So I just found it was a very interesting way of telling this story, and he also is constantly interacting with his ancestors, which I really enjoyed that as well. So kudos to Kevin for finding a way to push the form forward with this. I also found his music very of the moment, very contemporary sounding, a lot of rap, a lot of pop. Let me give a shout out to, I think it was Calvin, Aiden Alvarez. I think that was the middle boy. His voice, he was with the runs. He was a really good pop singer. I really enjoyed listening to him. All right, so keep an eye on that show. Next, we have The King of Harlem. This show also featured a lead male character played by Sidney DuPont. This is set in Harlem. So all of the characters are black with the exception of Federico Garcia Lorca, who is played by Gabriel Bernal, and he is Latino. Let me say the book, music, and lyrics are by John Michael Lyles and David Gomez. Of most of the shows, this one probably felt the most traditional in structure. We have the lead character. He is a boxer who has a strong want. He wants to be successful as a boxer, but we come to find out that he is also gay, and he's struggling with that. He has a girlfriend who he's planning, or I should say, I think a fiance who he's going to marry, and then he meets this guy, Federico Garcia Lorca, who's very out and proud, and it turns his world upside down. This show takes place in the Harlem Renaissance, which I don't know when that is. Is it the 40s? I should know this. When did Langston Hughes live? I don't want to pause this. Okay, so The King of Harlem takes place during this time period, since I can't remember. What I really loved about this show, I loved it because I liked that it was more traditional, but the music for this was great. There was one song, let me see if I can remember, Rent Party. There's a song called Rent Party. They go to this party in Harlem, and it's of a lot of interesting artistic people, gay people, and Federico takes mercy to it, and I just thought the song was really delightful and fun. But this show has a very strong score, but it feels like it might end tragically. Didn't feel like a full-on musical comedy. There's a lot of angst and drama in it. But keep an eye on King of Harlem. I think it might have some legs. All right, we're gonna get into the funny shows. I love a musical comedy. So next we have Finn. Finn is actually a show for young audiences, theater for young audiences. It tells the story of Finn, a shark who is being pressured by his sister to conform and join the Shark Guard, which is all these tough, masculine, brutish sharks who have these responsibilities to guard certain parts of the ocean. And they're tasked with guarding this celebration of these colorful tropical fish are coming together for this big celebration, and the Shark Guard basically protects them to make sure no one interrupts their party. That's the conceit. And we go with it because they present it early on, and we go, okay, I understand this world. I'll go with it. So what happens? Of course, Finn is more interested in being one of these fabulous, colorful fish than being part of the Shark Guard. So the subtext here, of course, is kind of a boy who looks at what the girls are doing and wants to do girl stuff, but is feeling pressure to do boy stuff. And you can look at that in any manner of way. No kid would get that's what this was about. On surface level, Finn is just about someone who wants to do something than what's expected of him, and he doesn't want to conform. And I think that's a great lesson for kids. Now, you may have heard of Finn because it has been in the news of late, because it was a show that was commissioned by the Kennedy Center and presented at the Kennedy Center, and it was set to go on tour. But then this guy named Donald Trump, maybe you've heard of him, he took over the Kennedy Center. He said it because a small portion of their funding comes from the government, a small portion, therefore he should be in charge of all of it. And so he fired everybody as he is known to do, and he took it over and he canceled all of the programming. And so these writers, this was written by Chris Nee, Michael Kuhlman, and Chris Diamond. Book and lyrics by Chris Diamond and Chris Nee, the Chris's, and music by Michael Kuhlman. They lost their tour. But fortunate for them, they had submitted to the NAMT Festival. So this is one of the shows, though, where I go, how blind was the submission? Now, that being said, I really enjoyed this show. So I definitely did think it deserved to be part of the festival. I'm glad that it is getting the recognition that it deserves. And honestly, I think what happened to them, their tour being canceled, is going to end up being the best thing that could possibly happen to them. Because people in the theater community do not like when government comes in and takes over their theaters. Yeah, that's not cool. That's not really what we do in the United States, is it? No. We don't take over private organizations that are benefiting from government funds and say, because you receive a little bit of government funds, we're going to take you over entirely. No, we don't do that. Okay, I got off on a tangent. So, case in point, the writers in their introduction said that Concord Theatrical, which is the biggest licensing company of musicals, has added Finn to their catalog. So Finn is available for licensing all over. And they got to present their show, which they had tracks. They performed to, where all the others had 3 musicians. These guys performed to fully orchestrated tracks. They had incredible performers. All of the performers are incredible. I haven't mentioned this before. The casting director, Michael Casara, pulls people with Broadway credits. This is why, as a writer, you want to be in NAMT. You are going to get a killer cast. And Finn, like all of the shows, but Finn also had a really killer cast. It starred Gray Henson as Finn, who I reviewed very positively in Elf. He starred as Buddy in Elf. He was also in Shucked. He was also in Mean Girls. So Gray was perfect in this role. Across the board, great cast. I won't go into all of them. You can look them up. So I loved this show. I think this is going to be great for kids and family audiences. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of sparkle. There was a lot of humor in the show. Hats off to the book writer. Very funny show. I think it tells an important message. My only concern, and maybe this was cut from the book, they keep saying, I'm a shark and they're fish. And I was like, sharks are fish. But maybe they talk about that at some point. Let's not miseducate our youth about sharks, telling them sharks aren't fish. Sharks are fish. They're just not colorful. All right, which is the point of the show. All right, so I really enjoyed Finn a lot. Okay, I saved this one for last because I found this the most enjoyable of the 8 shows I saw. This was just a 3-person musical comedy. If we leave out Finn, which is a TYA show, it was the only musical comedy. And I love musical comedy. So this was my favorite show just because I like to laugh. This is book and music by Brett Ryback and book and lyrics by Jeff Lupino Esposito. And the lead character, this is a young woman who is a writer and a journalist. I think she's a journalist. And she is escaping from her life in New York. Guys, I saw a 45-minute presentation, so I may be getting some of this wrong. Anyhow, she's doing kind of like an escape where she needs some time for herself. So this young woman rents a house in the Hudson Valley, this old house, and once she gets here, she discovers that it is haunted by a very attractive young man who was played by James Olivas, and Jordan, the woman, is played by English Bernhardt. And my friend Brandon Contreras played the 3rd role, and he basically plays all of the other roles. And gosh, he was stealing the show. He's so funny. But I just found this book and the lyrics and the songs, this was just a funny, fun show. Now, I don't think this show will go to Broadway because it's just a 3-person show, but I do think this show would do great at regional theaters. Regional theaters who like to produce new musicals, this is a 3-person musical comedy that I think will be very enjoyable. I only saw 45 minutes of it, but I loved every minute of the 45 minutes I saw. So yeah, that's Love is Dead. So those were the 8 shows that I saw at NAMT this year. I also saw selections at the college road trip. So many inserts. At the college road trip, there were presentations done by Michigan State University and San Diego State University, as well as Florida State University and Syracuse University. Let's start with those. Both Syracuse University and Florida State University came out right at the beginning and said that their focus was really to serve historically underserved writers, meaning people of color and women primarily. So the shows that they have been developing there, one was about Emily Dickinson, and there was a song presented about that, and another one was about Amelia Earhart, and they did 2 songs from Amelia and me. So very women forward. These shows will pass the bechamel test. Bechamel, that's a sauce. This test, which means that there's women in a scene who are talking about something other than men, which you'd be surprised how often that doesn't happen. So that's what these are really focused on. The other, Syracuse presented a show from Lighthouse and a show called Magia. And they're all featured primarily, Magia featured women of color. I remember that. That was about 2 islands in the Pacific where one island gets wishes granted and the other island basically suffers as a result of those wishes. It's like the energy had been taken from that island and it's given to this other island. And so this young woman is like, I'm gonna go talk to the people on the fancy Wish Island and tell them what they're doing to our island. So that was interesting. And then Bus Stop also presented a song sung by a woman. So then we get to Michigan State, and they presented In Pieces and We Foxes and Taking Off. Now, a lot of these shows presented by these universities were selected from the NAMT festival from previous years. I'm recognizing In Pieces, but I think it was even more than that. The other one presented 4 songs from Till Death Do Us Part, Postcard American Town, Orchards, and The Island Dies. That was San Diego State. So, and they're open to any kind of writer. So they have had a bigger variety of shows that they were presenting from, which was very enjoyable. So I had male singers as well as female singers, comedies as well as dramas and tragedies. One thing I did notice, and yes, this is a criticism, even though I know I'm not supposed to be a critic, I felt like all of the songs that were presented were big power ballads, big 11 o'clock numbers, which are impressive. But when you do an hour of songs and you listen to 8 power ballads back to back, as an audience, it's quite a lot. And, one of these shows, I think it was the flight one, Taking Off, the writers set it up as being this comedy and they set up the conceit of it. And I said, that sounds hilarious. I can't wait for this comedic song. And then they did the 11 o'clock power ballad, which was great. It was called Ready for the World, and it was a really great song. But I was just wanting, give me some comedy, people. Musical comedy. Give me some musical comedy. Is that too much to ask? Well, it's not, because then when I went to the NAMT podcast recording, they did end with a very funny song called Dick or Macaroni. And that's all I'm going to say about that. And then the other songs were I think were ballads. But they did give me a comedy uptune to end with. That was Tom Morrissey, Andrew Strano, and Yuriko Shibata. Their show, which got a grant, writer resident grant from the Frank Young Fund for New Musicals. So they did a comedic song, so hats off for that. I really appreciated them wrapping up my NAMT experience with a fun comedic song that the audience could clap their hands and sing along with. Really enjoyed that. So check out NAMT Live. That's a podcast, and you can actually hear, there was a song presented by Timothy Huang, who I know, Tabitha Moore, who was the winner of the 2024 Musical Theater Songwriting Challenge for high school students. So a little more about NAMT. They do a high school songwriting challenge, which is amazing, getting these young people involved in musical theater. They also have these grants like the one I just mentioned, the Frank Young Fund for New Musicals, where they give funding to a theater. They give, it's not a huge amount. It's like $5,000 to $10,000 for a theater that wants to do a production, $2,000 to $5,000 for someone that wants to do a reading, and then maybe a $1,000 or $2,000 to help theaters that want to do outreach or want to do a reading of new musicals. So NAMT is an incredible organization. If you don't know about them, look into it. If you're a writer, you should be submitting to NAMT. I know I haven't got lucky yet. And I think I've submitted both of those shows twice. Maybe I only did one once because I was like, I'm going to do rewrites on this show and resubmit it to NAMT because it needs to be in there because it's about Ukraine. It's timely, right? That's my show Virtuoso. Check it out. All right. Guys, I don't know who watched this video because it is not my usual bored and confused review, but if you came to learn a little bit about the National Alliance of Musical Theater, I really appreciate it. I hope you've gotten excited about new musicals because, guys, there's so much going on out there outside of Broadway. A lot of these shows that I'm talking about are just not Broadway shows, not because they're not great, but because a Broadway show is a certain size of show. It's a certain kind of show that is going to appeal to a certain kind of audience. And so I'm so appreciative that these universities and theaters are producing new musical theater and not just, most theaters just say, oh, we're going to just do what was on Broadway. Well, you're getting a very narrow focus of the world of musical theater if you just do Broadway shows. That is only one kind of musical theater. There's these three-person shows. There's these shows that are unusual, that are quirky, that don't have a typical boy meets girl, loses girl, gets girl kind of narrative. And for people who really can enjoy this art form in its variety, NAMT is doing a huge service. All right. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you made it to the end, you are my favorite person in the world. And I will see you at the next one, which shall be another bored and confused review. Bye-bye.